Hi everyone, Nadia Davis here, and welcome to Friday's Spiritual Advocacy. It's raining hard here, and so you'll hear the pounding rain as it falls, and while me and my mom are here warm and safe and peaceful, it kind of represents what we're going to talk about today. So the concept of spiritual advocacy. It sounds fancy, and I like it because I'm an advocate and attorney by trade, but I teach Kundalini Yoga now, and I guess you can officially say I'm a published author. But spiritual advocacy came about in terms of when, on my road of recovery, shame was so heavy duty that it kept me in this attacking survivalistic mind on an extreme that for those in recovery from mental health, chronic pain, grief, addiction, whatever it might be, anyone that's in quote-unquote recovery, shame can lead to feelings of low self-worth, of severe isolation, of believing that nobody gets it, of a focus on comparing ourselves to everything on the outside, and to just a core belief in ourselves that we are quote-unquote bad, flawed, whatever you might say. Now, when others then are branding, there are words and names like addict, criminal, infidel, broken, crippled, disabled, whatever it might be. And those take a life of their own in our heads. And that is what shame is. Shame is I am flawed, I am wrong, I am bad. And so in everything I do, I have hashtag ban shame. And there's one way that I have shared what I mean by that. Spiritually advocating for ourselves is to be aware of our own mind's shame and our own ways that we project what that shame is based on. Fears, survivalistic modes of training that come from childhood. And when we become more aware of those, we can be more loving. We can start on a journey of healing and recovery. And we can also take a stand when we see it projected by others onto us, onto each other, and then how media handles human struggle. So attack thoughts, being aware of them is one way to advocate for your true self and your spirit. Now, I live this work every day. I'm dressed in a nice shirt, my hair isn't all crazy, my makeup is done, and I look all put together. At least I hope so. Yet there are struggles every day. And inside, even before this, I feel frazzled because I want to get the message out to help people. I had a Kaiser appointment this morning and then had to coordinate getting my mom here. And there's just times where, even in surrendering my heart in a relationship, or feeling, I need to stick inside this independence and not let another in, that battled with feelings of love, where things get hairy and messy. And then there's being a mother. Being a mother is an opportunity to be aware of when I am triggered, first and foremost. Really, that's really a core thing that happens in parenthood. And when we're not aware of when we are triggered, we make our children our projects. And so I balance trying not to do that because my children are souls on their own journey, and trying not to come off here like I have all the solutions, like everything is perfect, but then offering solution through my story, embracing the story with courage, owning the story, and then sharing it so others can find a way out of darkness. Those are hard to navigate. Yet this topic on my spiritual path, the topic of embracing the paradox of life, is something that is a different way of getting to surrendering to feelings that look similar to shame, fear, and other things, so that we don't beat ourselves up. When we can embrace that there is fear and then also courage, when we can embrace that there is fear, yet also a sense of safety, when we can embrace that there is recovery, yet also struggles, we can try to begin to not beat ourselves up and then kind of dive and surrender into the middle and explore ourselves, explore the feelings. I'm trying to teach my kids that, to be okay with those feelings. Yet I have a special guest today who's gonna talk more about the spiritual side of this and how our minds work and kind of how we go immediately into polarities. So Priya Jain will be joining us, and when she joins us, we're going to elaborate on a couple of things. What do I mean? What does she mean by living in paradox? You see, when we have fears, when we have shame, we beat ourselves up. Sometimes even when we have joy or love. Yet it takes embracing those feelings. It takes vulnerability to have human connection, to have spiritual growth. And so if we can know that shame or fear or any of the extreme negative feelings and emotions have an equal on the other side, we can observe the fears and the shame, recognize it as what I call an attack thought, and say, what is this fear? What is this shame trying to teach me? And hopefully surrender to a middle. Our minds are trained to think in polarities, to think fear, safety, to think pain, joy. And why is that? When we have preferences for one, that there should only be joy, that there should only be unconditional love, that there should only be full trust and not doubt. When we think in polarities, that is our mind tricking us. When we can at least say, okay, I'm gonna say, it is okay that I am feeling joy, yet I am also sad about a lot of things. That I am feeling an incredible love from somebody, yet there is also a deep hurt wound in my heart from a prior experience. When we don't beat ourselves up for not fully being at a point of full healing, full loving, full joy. When we get rid of that preference, we can then say, okay, what is this fear, this lack of trust, this whatever might be here on the other side? What is this trying to tell me? I'm not going to beat myself up for this. I'm going to say, I'm going to live in this paradox. I'm not going to let shame reel me down this full-on negative, very, very, very damaging to self-worth path. I'm going to acknowledge the other side. Life is a paradox. They often say that, we're souls living in this physical body. I fully believe that, so I will say it. We are infinite, whole, perfect, and complete spiritual beings at the core. We started from a nothing and a everything, whatever you want to call it, a spark, a big bang, God, Adam and Eve. I believe I call that it. I just use a general term. From it, something moved. Something was created. And over time, the human race was. It's really just that simple. But in that space of that science or spiritual spark, there was no fear. There is no judgment. That is our true source. That is where our true self lies. And in this physical body, we simply have a mind that's survivalist in nature and thinks in polarities. And when it's not at the positive or successful or fully fulfilled side of that polarity, we beat ourselves up when we're feeling the opposite. A step to banning shame and shaming is to embrace and surrender right to the middle. And Priya has joined us, and so I'm going to welcome her.
Hi, Nadia.
Hi.
Hello, everybody. I
No
apologize for being
need
late.
to. I'm so happy you're here.
I know. How are you doing today?
I'm living the paradox. I'm doing okay. I was, very brutally, honestly sharing. I really don't know how any other way to live is. I get this anxiety. You talked about this a little bit when, you know, um, when I'm trying to just be like okay, I want to say the solution all clearly. And right now I'm feeling a little frazzled and, let me sit back, yes, and ground myself. And then it just becomes clear and I'm feeling enlightened. And then the ego mind in me is, the beating up and I'm like right there. Like I feel very in tune, very attuned. And at the same time, my little Nadia survival, get things done, have them all organized is in full mode. So at least I feel like I'm in my heart, which is the goal, which is the goal. And I shared earlier.
Yeah. As long as your
Yeah.
roots are in the heart, then we can employ the mind. It's okay. There are times we have to be in this organizational mode, and the mind is
Yes.
what we need for that. But as long as our roots are sitting in the heart, and I was gardening, it's about to be spring right now. We're going through the midst of,
Yeah.
seems like an Arctic winter.
Did it hail
But
out there?
but I was planning on a little bit, yeah. Yesterday. So far, so good today. But I found this beautiful. I've always wanted this these flowers. I forget the name. These It's a vine that has
Mm-hmm.
beautiful purple flowers. But they say its roots thrive. Its roots need to be in the shade, and its stems and its leaves need to be in the sun. And I thought, what a wonderful analogy of
Yes.
our dealing with, each one of us is really unique. But I was trying to hold it, like, where do we need to root? Do we need shade for our roots, or do we need sun for our roots? Like, what makes us thrive?
Right.
And in different stages of our life, maybe different things make us thrive, right? So I think when in a state of conflict like you are going through, it's important to first just sit back and clear the conflict from your being, because that's where a lot of the energy goes.
That's beautiful. I was going to just to ask and open up the discussion on, like, how do we find that space? How do we create it for ourselves, and to get to that neutrality where we can embrace the paradox? And so you have referred to, the ground, the root chakra, the first three, and that kind of that being this corporate America, and then the upper chakras, and how they refer to, like, those in their upper, like the la la land people, and how when we can get to our heart, that I think that's really the goal, and living in that. But it sounds nice, and it sounds nice.
Yes.
Yes.
Harder to do. Yeah, hard to do in a state of stress. Heart is nowhere to be found in a state of stress.
Like, talk a little bit more, and using that analogy about, like, how can we get to non-polarity, where this is such a loaded question. I mean, it takes a lot of work, but for a basically what I'm trying to verbalize at the most basic scale for myself and for my children is simple. This is at the mental level. Is, if it's okay to be afraid, you're going to try out for the Lollapalooza is what it's called. It's okay to be afraid. You're being really courageous and doing the air guitar right now, and to embrace both the fear and then the courage, that's like verbally, literally. But can you elaborate on just the basic workings of the mind that often is shaped when we're young in the survivalistic root survival mode, and how in the very beginning we can move from that to
I find in the beginning there is no way to move there. The process of life is set up the way it is set up for a reason. And like I always mention, tension, pressure, stress, and friction are stepping stones to finally understanding your own mind's working and your own nature to an extent where you can now settle into a space within yourself and then deposit it, drop
like
roots into that
body.
space. But when we are starting off,
safety.
but when we're starting off, let's say when we are children or when we are teenagers, when we haven't had enough life experiences, having fear is a natural state.
Right.
There is no problem with that. I don't think we should save our children from that
No.
fear, because sometimes that
Right.
fear becomes motivation, right? Because motivation is one way we sprout into action. We activate our rajasic element, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
in everyone's
I
nature
meant
the three
the
building
message
blocks,
was
right?
to
The
not beat themselves up. No, feel the fear.
correct,
The message
correct,
of the ban shame. That
yes,
if it's taking you to a
right,
place that is enclosing you, instead feel it, embrace it. That was what I meant.
exactly, absolutely, and that's absolutely right in how you're guiding them. It's, hey, there's going to be fear, and you will lose sometimes. You will not succeed other times. You will fall multiple times. But the point is, each time you rise up from that, you will learn something new. And each time you learn something new, you will know
Right.
where to anchor next time. And I like to give my personal example, at least I did that with my son, is like, I didn't know what I wanted to do till I was 35, even though I tried so many things and I failed at some miserably. I was not good at them. And
Yeah.
there's shame involved in that. Of course, there's shame involved in that, feeling horrible and embarrassed. That sensation of embarrassment is very important to
Right.
acknowledge with our children. It's like, you will be embarrassed because you don't know. But, well, my son did this
I would
interesting
love to
thing. I'll
hear
just
more
share a little quick story.
about everything you
You know,
just said.
so
But yes.
this is about talking to him about, hey, there will be embarrassment. It's part of life, and how I get embarrassed uh, each time I get up in front of a class to teach. There are things I say, maybe I have an accent, still have an Indian accent, or however I say it. There's moments of embarrassment, but it's okay. Like, that's what's helped me own myself.
Wow.
I have my little dog trying to get into the frame. um, so this is when he was a senior, and he went to Canada for the first time on a MUN delegation. They were supposed to
Wow.
public speak in front of all these people, and he was ice skating the night before, and he falls and he breaks his front
Gosh.
tooth.
Oh my
This is
God.
right before. So talk about shame and embarrassment for a teenager, and who's still trying to figure out, maybe starting off with a fake
Mhm.
self-confidence in the first place.
Wow.
But in that moment, I wasn't there with him, but in that moment, he had to make a choice. Either he hides in embarrassment and shame of
Mm-hmm.
how he will be perceived, or he gets up there and faces it head on. So he gets up there, literally no front tooth, and everything he was saying was sounding slurry, right? There was like blur in his tone. Nothing was crisp, nothing was clear. There was some
Mm-hmm.
laughter in the audience, but everyone who knew him was in
Wow.
awe of his bravery, right? So it's interesting for him, that one pivotal moment of that one decision, that he decided to face the shame, face the embarrassment, and go with it anyways. What does he
Right.
have to lose? And I think that's what he used as his essay to get into his
The
college.
courage.
That it was a transformative moment for him to face that feeling of embarrassment head on, and or possibly fail, because he might not be able to articulate what he wanted to articulate in those MUN
It's
delegations,
so
right?
interesting because it was vulnerability at its core. And
It is.
there's
There
nothing,
you go.
I was listening to something, and there's a woman her name's Dr. Monica Franco, and she was saying, this is a different way of looking at things, that there's nothing inherently vulnerable, that what is vulnerable is what we're taught to feel shame about, and
Mm,
in or about us, but then human connection, we need
mm,
vulnerability. We need vulnerability for the spiritual growth. So in that moment when he was
mm,
worried, you know, and when you were in your own exploration professionally and feeling, you know, that vulnerable, there was something, and I can give you all kinds of examples. There's something where we learned to feel shame in or about ourselves, about what was going on, about, you know, the tooth or the not reaching a certain professional role, and this is where the embracing of the, like, it's okay to be embarrassed or to be afraid for your with your son's situation, and to to feel down on yourself that you weren't finding the right niche, and not go to shame, to recognize the feeling, and then get in the middle, do that, and arrive at the courage and the exploration, that middle surrender part, and not
Right. But I also want to acknowledge that this feeling of shame has a lot of gradients. You know, it's not just one solid color that we drop into. Like shame can be experienced in so many ways. Like I said, embarrassment is just one of the colors, one of the gradients of shame.
So many ways.
It's very subtle. But there's a deep shame that I find a lot of women feel when they are the ones who have been abused. They are the ones who haven't had the congenial childhood environments because of which their growth is stunted, or their emotional growth is stunted, or it sets them back. But they're also the ones that carry the shame of the event, which is ironical, right? And I've always wondered why that happens. Like, why do we as women, especially women, are so vulnerable to that? Why do we carry the shame of something that wasn't under our control, something of which we were the victims? Right? So that's a very solid color of shame.
And I think there's a variety of different reasons. But I'd love to hear more about where you were going. I mean,
right. So the idea of shame is that, you know, it's a shadow of the second chakra. Again, all of these experiences and feelings are inherent in every human being. So let's say you don't know anyone maybe on Andaman Nicobar Islands, somewhere deep in the ocean island, right? So a human being over there who's not been conditioned to the Western mind will also feel shame in some way or form, because we are tribal mindsets. And tribe means anything that doesn't adhere to the tribal mentality, and they are feeling like an outcast, will create a sensation in them that we verbalize as shame. But it's a sensation within us. It's a sensation of not fitting in. It's a sensation of a lack within us, lacking something, right? Second chakra is all about fitting in and connecting to a larger community around us, being accepted, being understood by a larger community around us, and feeling like we are part of it. And shame is something when either we ourselves tell ourselves the narrative like, no, I don't belong, or I am not accepted, or I'm not validated, or I am shut down. When my voice isn't heard, when my opinions and ideas are not confirmed, I feel like I'm not part of the larger whole, and I feel left out.
Absolutely.
That is shame.
Absolutely.
Right?
So damaging.
So the shame is it's a shadow of the second chakra. It's a shadow of the second chakra. So there's no shunning it. So there's no, I should not go there, because the moment the should comes, there creates another condition in our mind that I am lacking. And so that means anytime I feel less than part of the whole, I'm creating another condition, another conflict within me, and say I should not be feeling shame.
And it's so isolating. It is so It
isolating.
is like
Now we are isolating ourselves.
the
Now no
roots.
one else
It's
is
like
isolating us.
it's
We are
like the
isolating
trunk
ourselves.
of loneliness,
Yes. Yes.
addiction, all of the self-harm that people, I mean,
Yes.
it's
Absolutely. It's a little cubby hole that we find deep in the dungeon of our being, where we can hole up in aloneness and feel so disconnected both from the universe and our collective tribe as humanity. And that aloneness it feels more um, scarier than death itself.
absolutely the shadow of the
And
sixth
so it's
chakra.
what you're working on, that I see you working on so actively in the world today, Nadia, and kudos to you for that, is to bring up this topic of let's open up all these doors, let's open up all these secret doors to our inner self and find that little dungeon that
Right.
we've created for ourselves, where we like to go and hide when we don't feel like we belong, when we made so many mistakes in our life that we are shunned by community, and that's the only place we can hang
Well,
out.
and what you said
Let's
right
open
now
those doors
about
up.
this, the root chakra and that isolation is, you know, and the belief of abusive women that it is their fault. It is all interrelated. And, you know, when we can then sit back and own how we responded to the abuse, how we responded to the isolation, and say, I am owning this story and being loving to myself. Brene Brown has said it is like the most courageous thing you can do. Yet, what creates the belief that it is your fault? All of those outside things, they cannot stop affecting somebody unless in the process of owning the story, you do return to the truth of what we are. Somehow there is that journey back to the innocence, to the core soul. And because the answer to your question about why, at least in my experience, why I blame myself, and why a lot of women that I've had the honor of meeting along the trauma recovery journey is it's so subtle. First of all, how gaslighting happens, and then it's so subtle how a dyadic abusive relationship and psychologically in the survivor's mind happens. It is so subtle that they don't think for themselves. It's so ingrained in that
Absolutely.
survival mode that, you know, the preference for any amount of joy, like or longing for any amount of connection and any amount of acceptance and love, is that the only way that can be achieved and attained is by
And that's where
owning the
a
wrong
lot
of
of women
another.
end up taking. Correct. But I also find that in this process where we feel so alone, that we are willing to take any crumb of
Exactly.
acceptance that comes our way, that actually puts us more and deeper into the bind without using our intuition. As women, we have intuition, and our intuition is telling us, nope, this is not the right person to find love in. This is not the right environment to find acceptance in. Your core is always speaking to you. But the problem is then when we go through something traumatic, we are so, harshly
Right.
uprooted from our core that we don't trust that intuition when it comes
Right.
through, because we are uprooted from ourselves. We doubt that intuition, and our ego mind always says, but there's at least this one person, maybe he's a narcissist, maybe he's pulling me in a trap, but at least this one person sees me as I am. Maybe this one person accepts me for who I am. But what we refuse to see is what is the cost that we will be asked for that one tiny moment of acceptance.
Yeah, or attention, even if it's abuse.
And that's when we fall into traps of abuse and traps of even addiction, which is our own inner process. Like this addiction is the one thing, this drug is the one thing that gives me some semblance of quietness, of peace from my own inner chaos that's going on.
It's so interesting because,
right? And so we go
personally,
for that,
and this is a whole nother podcast, one of the hardest, most painful experiences was how they viewed that behavior of mine after months of threats and, financial hacks and privacy violations and all kinds of stuff, how they viewed the behavior that you just described of any little, any bit of a little, even, you don't love me, and the beating myself up in my head was literally the only little light in the darkness. And how they viewed my responsive behavior as being, I consented to the abuse. And what a tragedy for women that are in these situations where we do blame ourselves, and it leads to that continued abusive contact. And so when I talk about spiritual advocacy, when we are able to finally heal and tune into our true worth and our true self, it does have a broader scope in terms of societal handling and viewing upon whole human beings. And asking the question that you asked is, I don't understand why she is having contact or blaming herself, or let's dive in a little deeper, and then the factual truths come out about what is really happening. And this is such a wider discussion than the paradox of life, but
it really is. But I do want to, maybe frame it with this one big statement, since we're talking about spiritual advocacy and you're such an advocate for banning shame. We cannot ban shame until we develop the consciousness to put ourselves in someone's shoes and understand, what did she go through? What was that loneliness like for her or him? How alone and unsupported did he feel by the humans, by the society, by the culture that surrounded this person, this human being? I mean, in order for us to evolve out of, especially presently, if you look around, whether it's social media, everyone is so quick to judge. And anytime there's judgment, there's shame on the other side, you see? So we judge by our face, our facial expressions, by our tones, by the looks that we give. But until we can develop in our own consciousness as human beings, can I allow myself to just take a breath and feel what that person must have felt when they chose maybe drug usage, maybe they chose a path that wasn't going to serve them in the long term, but why did they choose that? What kind of support could they have used in that moment?
That is transformative
in order
justice,
to not go into shame.
Versus,
right? So I would love for you to start really expanding on bringing that awareness to people. Like, how do we do this? How do we step into someone's shoes?
So home is within you.
Another human experience.
The advocacy nonprofit is officially in development, and it would begin some of that cross-training, my love. And it would be one person at a time, one frontliner, one survivor, and It's
Mm-hmm.
in partnership, and but we as women and men survivors, it really is one person at a time, and it's our
It's our individual
individual,
journey, but it needs the
yes,
support of the collective, because we
collectively,
are
yes,
part of the collective. Because in alone, if we are just by ourselves, when we are individuated, if we are growing and we're individuated, shame doesn't even appear because we know ourselves.
absolutely.
But until we know who we are, we need the support of the collective. We need one kind word from a stranger without any hooks
You are
into it. And
not
that's
alone.
a very difficult thing for the human ego to do, is to not present hooks. If you're helping someone, don't
Exactly.
present hooks for them to latch on to. Don't have an expectation that they will do something in return for you. If you see someone who is in that aloneness, and it's funny, you can feel people's aloneness. It's in their
No matter
aura,
how many people are around them.
right? You come across them, you can feel,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's so
Yes.
easy to see that. We work with a lot of young adults who are going through recovery process, and it's
Sorry.
so incredible to see them struggle in their aloneness. It's
They feel
so,
misunderstood
and
and
that's where
judged and labeled.
they feel misunderstood, and there's a defiance. They have to create these defense mechanisms that maybe show up as, like I said, defiance, or being a
And
loudmouth, or being
entering
irreverent,
that
however that
vulnerability
defense
is,
mechanism
again, they
shows
were
up.
taught to feel
Mm-hmm.
shame about something in or about themselves, and they're not going to show that
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. And that's the downside of the collective. You see, there's an upside of the collective, and some, because everything comes with polarity. The downside of the collective is because we've created certain standards and structures to operate as a collective. And when we fall below that, we are going to
Right.
be looked down upon. Again, I don't like condemning natural processes, but once that natural process takes place, can we provide support to that individual to rise up in their own
Right.
way, in their own unique form, to also be part of the collective? So the struggle I see currently with a lot of people is that they want to individuate without really knowing who they are.
And they want to heal without knowing a safe place.
Correct. And that's not possible. So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
in that aloneness
Yeah.
is the space when an awakening can happen. So even there is no problem with that aloneness
If
either.
we share our stories, and it's
Yes.
in
Yes.
somebody's own isolated space, you hear another
Yes.
person's story.
Yes. And that's what you're doing. So I
There's
truly admire
so
you
many.
for keeping up or showing up, because you don't know who might need to hear your voice and your story, and take inspiration from that. And also the same thing for your book, how amazingly, how it's written such a raw form, and somebody who's going through that aloneness is already raw, so you match that frequency for them so they could feel the realness and relate to it, and hopefully draw from your strength, that what you have used to bring yourself out of that tiny locked up cell within you, because
You
I've
saw me,
seen you in
right?
there. I felt you in there. Yeah, yeah. And
It
you
all.
have found that strength. You fell so many times and you crawled back up so many times. You fell again and you crawled back up. So that's a survivor.
But
Yeah,
it's in
that's a
all of us.
survivor.
You have an amazing story.
Yes.
We all have a different way of how, again, our
Mm-hmm.
survivalistic mind went and fighting the world, that I'm okay, I'm all right, and then, the damaging ways that we dealt with our fears and our
Yeah.
shame and whatever it might be. And I think we had the story circles for a reason in the past, and that the more that people embrace that vulnerability and share, I think the less shame that there will be keeping us hidden in the dark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for
Thank you,
doing this work.
Priya. I would love to have a more expanded discussion on the shadow of the second chakra and shame. Let's do that, okay?
Let's do that.
A whole
Yes.
workshop. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely.
Seriously.
Yes, a whole
Okay,
workshop.
thank you so much. Hugs to both you and Peter,
Thank
okay?
you. Bye.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe in the rain. Bye.
You too.